Hello Internet, welcome to Dali Codes. It's Dalmas here, and today we are beginning a new project, and the project is about computer vision. For the past year or so, I've been pushing back on this project because I had a feeling that it's going to be a heavy project. It's a project about identification of face masks on faces of people. So the purpose of the project is to create a web interface that connects to an API, and the API should be serving a machine learning model that identifies the facial features of a person, and I would like it to identify whether the person has a mask or not. So the project that I want to build in the course of this month is to be able to have a fully fledged end-to-end face mask identification system that if you are talking into a webcam, or you're looking into a webcam, or if it is connected to a CCTV, then it could be able to flag whether someone has a face mask or someone does not have a face mask. So without lots of things to say, let me begin on the structure. So what you should expect by the end of this video is we should have created a whole structure and all Docker files for this project, and the data that I'm using is from Kaggle. Let me just show you. This is the data that I'm using to build my project, and as usual I'm going to create a repository for this. So this is my interface. I'm going to call it face mask detection system, and I'm going to make it public. I'll not put a description. There should be a readme, and then I should ignore Python, but I would like it to ignore both Python and JavaScript because we were going to use JavaScript for front end. Then I want it to utilize code coverage. If you don't understand what code coverage and Travis UI, you can check in the description, or I'll put a card on top to take you to a video that I developed about testing. Yeah, so let's create this repository. Nice. So we are going to clone this repository. So cd to documents, cd, let me just make a directory, for YouTube, cd to YouTube. Then what is here? Oh, supposed to clone from here. Git clone this. So there is another clone somewhere there for face mask identification system, but it's fine. So what's inside YouTube? cd face mask identification system. Yep. So let's now start creating the structure from this. So now that we are in the repository, let's launch VS Code. So we are going to use VS Code to create the structure. So the first thing that I usually do is I create a folder for tests for all the projects. So tests will contain all the tests for functionalities, for unit tests, to contain feature tests. But for now, since I'm going to connect, it is connected to Travis CI, I'm going to create just one file for tests, and I am going to call it just test placeholder. Placeholder.py, a Python file. Then I'm going to import PyTests. Import PyTest, Control-Z. Yeah, then I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call it test placeholder. Then I'm going to define a function, and it's also going to be test placeholder. I'm doing this so that Travis CI and CodeCov can start testing and show us whether our tests are passing or failing. So test placeholder, just placeholder, and should take himself. Then we just pass here. And this is enough for the tests. So for it to connect to the Travis CI, you need a YAML file. So this is going to be .travis.yaml, and the travis.yaml file will have the language that you're going to use here. Language, what's the spelling of language? The language is Python for now, but we are going to build a front end with JavaScript and Vue as a framework, so we shall find a way of writing tests for it. But for now, I'm not so confident on how to write tests with JavaScript. Python, the version that we're going to use for Python should be 3.9. Then after that, we're going to install something. So whatever we're going to install, I'm going to leave this for now. Then I'm going to also have a part for script, and the scripts that should run should be PyTest, and it should also have a coverage, and the coverage should be equal to something which I don't know. Then it should be testing tests. Then from there, after success, we should send the report to CodeCov. So what we are going to install, first of all, we are going to export Python path, and this should be the working directory, pwd. Then we are going to pip install PyTest, coverage and CodeCov, and this happens later after installing some other stuff. We are going to install requirements. I don't know where I'm going to put requirements now, but later during the video we're going to see where to put requirements. Pip install -r for recursiveness. Then we're going to have requirements .text. Yeah, and these are our tests, and I think we are good to go. So let's now create other structures for this. And the first thing that happens, since this is a machine learning project or an AI project, the first thing that we're going to do is the lab, because you have to develop your model in the lab. So I'm going to have my lab folder here, and inside the lab folder I'm going to have the most important thing, which I'm going to copy from this side. You don't have any machine learning project without data, so I'm just going to copy data and I paste it here. So we have data, and what is in the data? I have test data, I have train data, and I have validation data. And with my test data, you can see them. There is someone with mask and then someone without a mask. So this is fine for the lab. The next thing that I need in the lab is a folder for models, where I will be keeping my models. So a new folder, and I call it models. Then is it in the lab? Yeah, it is. So let me close this. Then we need another folder for training. So this is where all the notebooks will be for training, and then another folder for processing. So in case the images needs cleaning, the images needs resizing, I would want to do it all inside here in several notebooks before I go into training. And then whenever I train, I'll put all the models here in the models folder, and the data is here. So this is majorly my lab, and remember that I want to do everything in Docker, so I am going to create a Docker file here. A new file, Docker file, and this Docker file is going to get Ubuntu image from Ubuntu. So I'm going to use Ubuntu Bionic. What's happening here is that I want to make sure that whenever I'm running anything in the lab, I run it in a container, in a Docker container, and this is the way I'm going to set up the container. Then from Python, I'm going to use Python, so I'm also going to import a Python image. Then I want to add the data inside a folder called code. So add all this code here, anything inside lab, we are going to add it inside a folder in Docker called code. Then my working directory, so work should be that folder called code. I'm going to create a file here, requirements.txt, requirements.txt. So this will be the requirements of the lab, whatever we need to do stuff here, training, cleaning, preprocessing, should be inside these requirements. And I also want to install it in the Docker container, so run pip install -r requirements it's requirements.txt then. So this is the lab, and whenever we talk about lab, you know that it is a Jupyter notebook or Jupyter lab. So first of all, I need to check the requirements here, and the requirements that I need will be Jupyter lab, or you can use Jupyter notebook if you're not comfortable with Jupyter lab, but I find Jupyter lab so kind for me. So pandas, I'm going to use Torch because I can't install, or I have not figured out how to install TensorFlow in Docker in Mac M1. Then I'm going to also use Torch Vision. Hopefully I will use it. Then I'm going to hopefully play with scikit-learn for fun, because this is just a lab. So okay, scikit-learn and matplotlib, because I'm going to be printing the images. Matplotlib, I'll be viewing these images, so I'll be plotting them. And then pytest, and we know why we need pytest. Yeah, so this will be installed here. Then after installing that, we are going to start the Jupyter server. So our command will be I want Jupyter and Jupyter lab, and where do I want it? I want it to run in this IP 0.0.0.0, so it's a local host but for the container. Then in this port, and the port should be 8888. Voila. So this is how I'm setting up my container for Docker and the lab. Then I will need to exclude the images from going into the container, because I'm going to be sharing the volumes. So I want to ignore, should I? I'm not sure, but let me just for fun, just to ignore images. So I'm going to have docker ignore, then I should have anything that ends with png. .png should be ignored. I also want anything that ends with .jpeg and anything that ends with jpg, and also anything that ends with jpeg in uppercase. Yes, so I have this. I think I'm not forgetting anything apart from the lab. I want, whenever you go to the lab, you should have also the documentation for it. So I'm going to copy this, and also in the lab I'm going to paste it here. So I have a readme, and this readme will be lab. So face mark identification system lab. Then I'm going to open terminal, new terminal. I'm going to clear this, then hopefully I'm in the lab. I'm going to move into the lab. Okay, so now what we want to do is to test if the Docker file is working and whether we can create a container from it. So first of all, I'm going to remove all the containers that I have on my system. So I'm going to have docker remove, and if there is a container running, you want to just forcefully remove it, -f. Then I'm going to create another function here, docker. So this is going to list all the docker images, docker ps -a, so -a shows whether it is running or not. Then q to get only their IDs, then run that. There is no container running. If you do docker ps, there's none running. -a, there's none. Okay, if we check docker images, there's none running, and docker image ls, there's nothing. So this is fine. So we can just do to run this container, we can do docker run, we give it a name, -name, we call it a lab. Then where is the docker file? It is in this folder. So let's run that, because it is not an image, that's why the problem. So docker build, and we give it a tag, and the tag is going to be lab version 1, and we build this docker file. Let's wait for it to complete. All right, so this is complete. If we look at docker image ls, we already see that we have an image called lab version 1. So we can now run that image. So docker, what am I writing? Docker run -name, and the name should be lab or labs. Then the image that we are running is lab version 1. So let's run this. Use root bypass, use allow root bypass. Okay, so it is telling us to allow root bypass. I'm going to bypass root here. Oh, sorry, -- allow root. Then let's again build the image, docker build, yeah, that. So let me build it again. Hopefully it will use checkpoints, not take time. All right, the image is built. Let's try again to run the image. Docker run. What does it say? That you have to remove. Okay, yeah, let me remove this. Docker rm minus first. I just want to remove all the containers, so docker ps minus eq. Nice. So let's run again the container. Nice. So this container is running, and it is running on this port. So this port does not show us. We had mapped the ports. Where is the docker run minus v labs? We need to map these ports. Control C, remove that container, minus name labs, then minus p. I want it to map port 8888 to 8888. Run this, then refresh this. Right, so we are here, and the token is different, so we need to have this token here. Here, then login, never, and we have this. So this is the container. The JupyterLab is running in the container here, but the way I run this, I ran this container, we don't have communication between the volume of the container and the volume of the PC. Like for example, if I create something here, let's say in the training, I say file, new notebook, and that is entitled notebook. If I come here to my lab, to my lab here, then I go to training, because it's there that we created a file. You will not see that file. So that file is in the container, but it is not in the PC. So what I want is to be able to share the storage of the PC with the storage of the container. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I want to see where that code is. So I'm going to move into the container. So I want to know which container is that. So docker ps, so this is the container that is running, and I want to seed into that container. So I'm going to do docker exec minus I and t. So I want it to be interactive then for this container that's running. So the ID of this container here. Am I missing something? Oh yeah, docker exec that, and then the language that I'm going to use is bash. So we are here in code. If we print working directory, it is just /code. So what I want is, let me exit. What I want is, whenever we are here, not in the lab, outside where there is the docker file, cd in the lab. So I want everything inside the lab folder to be shared with the container. So I'm going to run the container with the shared lab. So Control C to be interrupted. I'm going to delete that container, and then what is here. So instead of running it like this, I'm going to say -v. Then the first argument is here where we are, and then the next argument will be slash code. So that will be sharing the folder here and then the code, but this may not work. So instead of doing this, I should do backtick print working directory, then enter. So this container is running, and I'm going to close this. I'm going to click on this. Yes, open. No, not this one. Let me use this one for localhost. Yep. So this, now when we go to training and we create a file, file new, notebook, select. So you see this untitled, I mean, we can go to training and we have it here. So also we could try to ls what is in training, and we'll see it here. So whenever we run that command, let me shut down this container. Whenever we run this command here, it will share the volume between the working directory and the lab. So I'm going to copy this command here. We may need it in the future when we are doing compose and sharing volumes. So that. So this Docker file is ready. We can git add this, git. Why is it taking long? Oh, I added images. I'm going to clear git. I did a git commit and you saw the images. So what I'm going to do, I tried git reset hard. Hopefully nothing the images will not be taken. So I'm going to ignore .png, the same stuff that I did in docker ignore. So I should also ignore them in a git ignore so that we don't push them to the repo. If you need these images, you can check out this COVID mask detection datasets. Let me do a git add, git commit -m initial commit, then git push. So this is going to push to the repo that we created. I'm seeing a lot of files, so it seems that the images are skipped, but we shall find a way of removing those images from the repo. But it's just fine if it uploads the images. So yeah, so this is how I create the lab. In the next section, I'm going to show you how I create the API, how I set up the API. Then after that, I'm going to show you how I set up the UI. All of them I'm going to do with Docker. Yeah, so unfortunately the data went to the repo, so the repo could be heavy, but before I upload this video I would have removed it. Okay, so we can continue. So cd out of the lab, git add. So I've just identified that I pushed inside the lab and it could not see the git ignore which is outside the lab, but it's all fine. We can still remove it. So git add, git commit, my first commit, -m, my first commit, and then git push. Yeah, so now we have let me check here. Yeah, we have Travis.yaml and it's going to be running here. So I'm just going to go to Travis CI. So this is Travis CI and it is building, but what I want is not this. I want this badge here. So I'm going to change this to Markdown. Then I'm going to copy the rest of this. Command copy. There was an error there, but it doesn't matter. I just need the badge. The badge should be in this README. I'm going to close everything here so that I'm sure I'm putting something where it's supposed to be. I am done with the lab. I'm just working on this README to have a badge. So this will be the badge for Travis CI. So it is saying that the directory requirements.txt does not exist. Requirements exists in the lab, so we could open Travis this, and we should say lab/that. So git add this, git commit -m update Travis, then git push. So now we are going to work on the API folder. So I'm going to create a folder and I call it API. Inside of API should be where all the code to do with the API should reside. So I'm going to create another folder and I call it a source. So all the code will be inside the source. Then the rest should be the normal files that we expect in the folder. So there should be a Docker file. Then there should be a new file .dockerignore. Then there should be a README. I'm just going to copy the README from here. Copy, paste. So the README will be the README for the API. It should contain some documentation for the API. Then let's now work on the API Docker file. So this should be from Python. So the image that I'm going to use should be Python 3.9. 3.9. Then I'm going to set a working directory. The working directory, I'm going to call it code, but it's not the code for the working directory. It should be /code. So this code that you're seeing here is separate from the code that we had in the lab. This code here is the API. In fact, let me just call it API. Then I want to copy the requirements to this folder. So I'm going to copy /. So whatever is here, I don't have requirements file, so I'm going to create it. Yeah. So there should be also, there is a requirement for lab and there is a requirement for the API. So new file, I'm going to call requirements dot text. We shall see what to put there. So this is in the Docker file, we're going to have requirements dot txt. And I am going to copy it to /API /requirements.txt. Then I'm going to run a code that is going to help me install these dependencies from the requirements. So it's going to be run pip install. I don't want catch, no catch directory. I also want it to upgrade just in case it is not an upgrade. Then -recursive, then /API /requirements.txt. So this will help me to run that. Then after that, I want to copy. This should be uppercase. I want to copy what is inside that folder to API in the container. Then after that, since it is a fast API, in fact the requirements should be having fast API, I think. So we can come back here and you say fast API. We are going to install a fast API. We're going to use fast API as a framework. We could use Django REST framework or API Flask, but I think fast API is much better according to me. Anyway, don't come back shouting at me that fast API or Django REST framework blah. I'm going to use fast API. Yeah, so let's set a command to run this fast API. So cmd command fast API uses UV icon. So UV icon, then the next code should be source .main .app. So we expect main app. Yep. Then the host should be the local host. The local host, I'm using 0.0.0.0. Then the port should be 80. So minus port, and the port should be 80. So this will help us to set the fast API. Inside the source, I need something because this Docker file will not run without the source. So I'm going to make the source like a module. So there will be dunder init.py. This is just an empty module identifier. Then a new file, I want a main.py. So the main.py is the home file for fast API that will be receiving the requests, the post, the get, the put, the delete requests. So I'm going to use typing. From typing import union. Then I will use it later. You'll see it from fast API import this class, import fast API class, fast API. So the app should be fast API. So we have that app object. So we are going to define the root when someone calls the endpoint. Let me just call it read root. When someone calls one endpoint, it should be the root endpoint. It should return this object, hello endpoint, hello endpoint, and the root that the path that we want this to be called at should be at app.get just the first link root. Yep. I could have another endpoint just for trial purposes. So let's say someone wants to get an item at app.get slash items slash we want an item ID. So that's the decorator. So we are going to define read item. So these are not related to the project, but it's just something that we're going to use to test that our API is working. This should be an integer, and then Q should be a union. So this is where I was telling you that I'm going to use the union. Could be either a string or none. Could be a string or none, and it should be equal to none. So this function, when you call this endpoint, it should be able to give you a return this object should be item ID is item underscore ID, then Q is Q. So this is how I'm going to set up my API. I doubt if there are things that are remaining. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to build this Docker file into an API. So Docker build --tag. I'm going to call it API version 1, and we are building where the Docker file is inside API slash. So let this build. Then we're going to run it and see if the endpoint is going to be exposed. What is it saying? API requirements.txt is not found. Requirements.txt. Copy this. Requirements. Yeah, let's try again. Slash requirements is not there. Can't we just do this? Oh, let me just move inside the API folder. Then I'm going to do this. So I'm having this error of slash API requirements. So remove this. Should be pip install -r API. So this is copy requirements. Should be requirements n and n. So they are saying this should be here, requirements Let's try again. Yeah, it seems to be working. So it seems it is complete. We could try to run this. So I can run the docker run minus name APIs, and then we are going to run API version 1, and the port -p, I want the port to be 898980, mapped to 80. So let's run this. This is crazy. So I'm going to update my requirements. So pandas, torch still, because I may deploy the model with the torch, then also torch vision, PyTest. I need my first API. I want to limit the version, so it should be between 0.68.0 to 0.69.0. I also want Pydantic, and my Pydantic should be greater than or equal to 1.8 or less than 0, less than 2, I mean, sorry, 2.0.0. Then UV icon should be greater than or equal to 0.15.0, and it should be less than 0.16.0. Then let's remove all the images. I think I have written remove all that, and then remove all images. Then let me build Docker again. I'm going to build API image. Okay, so we have built the image. We are going to run that image. Docker run -name API image version 1. Got an expected extra argument 0 host 0.0.0. Docker file. This is a variable. So we are going to build, we're going to remove that image, and we're going to remove that container, and then we're going to build the image again. There was an error here with the host. So after building the image, I'm going to run the container. So string source main app must be in the format module attribute. How did I put it? Main. Oh, so this should be, this is the attribute. That's the, again, let's remove the images, let's remove the container, remove the container, then let's build the image. Then let's build the content. Let's run the container. Hopefully now it will run. Yes, so this runs. When I click this, I open, yeah, we can see now hello endpoint. Nice. And we can now try to access. So here, this is the endpoint that is showing us, and we can now try to access items with an item ID. So we can just say /items and 89 as an item ID, and we have this. So yeah, so this is how I'm setting up the API, and that is how I set up the lab before. The next thing that we're going to do is to set up the UI with the Vue. So now that we are done with the API, I'm going to push it to Git. So Git add this, Git commit -m API setup, then Git push. So this is going to push to Git here. Oh, we can see the badge for Travis CI is passing. So now we are going to set up the UI. So the UI folder, and the UI folder should be Vue. So I'm going to use Vue. So let me move to /UI, and we are going to create a project for Vue. So we're going to do Vue create, and we're going to create a project called, I don't know how I should call it, face mask identification system _UI, and we're going to create it there. So let's create this. I want Vue 2 because I want to use Vuetify without problems. So as Vue project is creating, I'm going to add the normal file to the normal files that we know, so like Docker file. Then in the Docker file, I'm going to use Node. So from Node, and I want the latest Alpine. So latest LTS Alpine. Then I'm going to run. So since we're going to be building this later, so it should be like serving static files. So I'm going to install globally HTTP server. Then my working directory is up. So work da should be that work da should be /up. Then I'm going to copy everything in that folder, this folder here, Facebook mask identification system -UI or _UI. I'm going to copy all that. Now before I copy, let me copy the package.json. So package, all the packages.json. Mostly it's package.json and packetlock.json to that working directory. Then I'm going to install all the dependencies. I'm going to run npm install. Then after that, I want it to copy everything in fmis underscore UI to the same folder. Then I need to expose this port, expose it to 8080. Then I want now to put my command, and my command should be working with HTTP server, and it should be, since we are building, did I do build? Should be run here. Let me run npm run build. So since we build, we'll get static files, and then we're going to create a distribution folder called dist. So we want to expose port 8080 to that server that will be serving those static files in the dist folder, and our project is done. So we have Docker file should not be inside here, it should be in the UI. So how can I move it to UI? No, cancel. Docker, move to UI, move, where is that? Yeah, so this Docker file is part of UI, not that the system, right? So then I need docker ignore, and if I dot docker ignore, just in case we need to ignore anything when we're building the project. Then what else do we need? I need a readme, copy. Understandably that there is another readme that is created with Vue. Whenever you create a project, there is a readme that comes with it, but I also want a readme for just the project in general. Yeah, so that is how I set up my UI. I am not yet done with the UI, so we could use this command like cd to fm that, then npm run serve to look at how the UI will look like. Open this. So this is how the UI will look like, but I want to use Vuetify. So whenever I add Vuetify after working on the project, it messes up my work, so I want to add it before. So I'm going to do Vue and Vuetify, I think it is that. Yes, proceed. So this is going to take some time. Default. So as it is running, we could check if the CodeCov received any report. Nothing. Okay. So let's do again npm run serve. So let's go there, open. Yeah, so we have this is okay, this is fine. So our UI can be accessed outside the Docker. But now let's see how we're going to access the UI in the Docker. So let's create the image, cd out. So we're going to create the image. So docker build --tag, then we're going to say face mask, identification system, UI version 1. That's the tag, and the Docker file is here. I want to see this Docker file again, just so we exposed the port 8080. We're going to use that port 8080. Yeah, so this image is built. If we look at Docker images, we can see our image here. So this was our image for API. This is our image that we've created now. So now we can run a container. Docker run, Docker run minus name, user interface, minus port. We are going to map 8080 still to 8080. Then we need to have the name. Yeah, so the name is this, and the version is version 1. Docker run minus name is interface, and that port version 1. So it is running on here. We can click here, and voila, we have our image. We could Control C, we could run it again with another name just to be sure, and then we say port, instead of 8080, 8000. Let's just try 9000 to 8080, just mapping it. Then when we click here, it should go. Let's try 9000. Let me see if it will work. 9123. Yes, so this works. That means that we are accessing the view, the UI, which is in Docker in a container. Control C. So this is the UI. So I'm going to say git add this, git commit -m, and then the UI, then git push. So the next thing is to compose everything to work together. So what I'm going to do now is to create a Docker compose file. So new file, here we are going to have Docker compose.yaml, and this Docker compose, we are going to say the version that we're going to work with for Docker compose is 3. Then we are going to put services. So now we have 3 services that we're going to work with. So I'm going to put here services, and the services that we're going to work with now are the API, the lab, and the UI. So the first service is user interface service. And the user interface service, the build, it should build ./UI. I think there is a Docker file here in the UI. Yeah, it should build this Docker file. Then the volume, let me leave the volumes first. Let me work with ports. The ports, so I want to expose port 5001 or 5000 to 8080. Remember, user interface, if we look at the Docker file for the user interface, what is exposed is 8080. So that's the port that I'm going to use. We'll work with the volumes later. Then API service. So I'm going to build something that is in ./API, and the port, I want it to be in 5001, and the API is running on port 80 in Docker. Then the third service that we are going to work with is the lab service, and the lab service, the build should be in ./lab, and then the ports are in, just going to take 5002 and 8888. Yeah, so now what I'm going to do is cd out. If I list stuff here, I have my Docker Compose, so I'm going to run. First of all, I'm going to remove all the images so that we are sure that we are using the images that are generated by Docker Compose. So docker rmi -force, just in case anyone refused. Then docker image list -q. We removed all those images. Then for containers, we just do docker ps -aq. Then it is docker rm. So now we can now do Docker Compose app. So docker -compose app. Hopefully it works. Error, the file .docker compose YAML is valid because service user interface contains invalid type. Should be an array. They're saying that ports error because this file is invalid because services user interface service ports contains an invalid type. There should be a space here. So let's try again. So this is orchestration of all the images in one file, one compose. So it's going to build an image for each of these, and then it's going to run the images in different containers. since I removed images, that's why it's giving us this warning. Image this was built because it did not already exist, which is okay. And it is good to remove images, because if you built an image and maybe you updated your code and you never built it again, it may cause you trouble. So this is what I do here. So port 5000 is already in use, so let's try port 9000 and 9000. Right, so this is running, and we are going to check each of them. We're going to start with so the lab service one. The lab service one, we're going to click on this link. It doesn't work because we have mapped, this is the port in Docker, this should be the port in our system. This is the lab service, so I'm going to change the port up here to that, enter, and now we access the lab service. Let's check the user interface, so I'm going to click on this. The user interface is working, but still we could use this 9000, and it would also work with 9000. Then the API service is also running here, port 80, open. So the port with the API service, we say that it should be 9001. So that 9001, enter. So this is the API. If we do /docs, yeah, so you can see that we have 3 services running. We have the lab service where we can be building our models. We have the user interface where we are going to put our camera and stream the video from. We have the API that will be serving the model. Yeah, so that is how I set up that's how I set up my project. I'm going to be working on this project for the rest of August. Hopefully I can be able to get a model faster so that I can work on other stuff. What is remaining in this Docker Compose is just to share the volumes, but the rest is just okay. Thank you. Let me show you my face. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, it helps so much in the channel. Our target is to reach 100 subscribers by the end of August. Until next time, have a great week.